Hello, Carla Hartley here. It is Friday, August 7th, and I am going to be continuing my discussion of business valuation in the context of a divorce proceeding in California. All right, today I'm going to talk about the three common approaches for business valuation in California, and I'm going to point out the reasons why one in particular is most commonly used in family law proceedings. I think it's important for you to know that there are more than one methods of business valuation that are used in California courts as a whole. For instance, what is primarily used in family law proceedings would not be the primary method in a bankruptcy proceeding. Keep that in mind, and keep in mind also there are many types of these proceedings. So there are three types of valuation methods when we're talking about businesses. The first is the market approach. The second is the asset approach. The third is the income approach, also called the capitalization of earnings method. Today I'm going to just give you a couple of hit points on each one, and then pick this up again probably next week in a continuation of this discussion. Market approach. Starting here, what would the business sell for? That's the question. This has been ruled in a significant body of California law in family law proceedings, so I'm talking family law only. This has been ruled as inappropriate for most businesses in the family law courts. Now, the parties can always agree to this. I would advise that it's again, if you're going to be the spouse pushing it, it's probably because it's going to be advantageous to you. If you really want to look at the market approach, it would be because neither party wants to stay in the business and you're looking to actually sell the business, which is probably not a good financial decision unless you're both at retirement age. So what would the business sell for? This has been ruled inappropriate for most family law proceedings. That means when we go to trial, because the sale incident to divorce will not maximize the value of the business. It's a fire sale. That's the first thing. The court has a duty to ensure that it is putting an accurate value on the business. A fire sale is not an accurate value. It does not maximize the value of the community estate. So, it's also going to end up, if you do the valuation for a sale and then one party keeps it, they're getting a huge discount on the value of this business. And that operates to the detriment of the other party. The other reason this one's inappropriate is because most often we're dealing with a closed corporation, an LLC, sole proprietorship, that does not have a good market, and there are insufficient comparables. That's really the story on the market approach. There are other reasons that the courts disfavor this in family law proceedings in California. Those are the biggies. Then there's the asset approach. This is not commonly used. Again, the parties can't agree to it, but occasionally you can find a case that says, this might work, and it might work in a hybrid, especially with the income approach. What we're looking for with an asset approach is, first of all, whether you want to go with this approach or not, it's going to depend which side you're on in the case. And you're going to be looking to see whether the business is asset heavy in nature. And what I mean by that is whether the business has a lot of assets in it that are not necessarily producing income, that may even be a drain on any income that it is producing. Are there significant non-operating assets? That's another way of putting the same qualifier on this. This method, for the most part, does not take into account cash flow, cap rates, goodwill, which, California case law has a big body of information on. So when we're talking about whether we're going to deal with the asset approach, it is going to be a limited amount of what you're doing in California cases. Now, sometimes we do see a hybrid, because sometimes a hybrid between the asset approach and the income approach are appropriate. For the most part, what we do is use the income approach and value the assets separately, because that is often appropriate as well. That is a bit of a hybrid. Courts are allowed to do hybrids. Parties can agree to whatever they want. The purpose of this is to convince you to know what you're agreeing to and know what your options are before you agree. The third and the most common method in family law proceedings, and it does seem to me from reading all of the appellate documents and court documents and the standards of practice with our forensic accountants, The income approach is where it's at in family law proceedings. This is also called the capitalization of earnings method. What this takes into account is the income, the gross receipts, the expenses of the proceeding. And of course, in expenses, one party is going to want to say the perquisites are legitimate expenses, the other party's not, but it all goes into the kitty in determining the value of this asset, the business. So then we're going to look at the assets that are in the business. We're going to look at, if it's a bunch of desks, we're not going to be too concerned. If they're all fully depreciated, they're still sitting inside the building. If we're talking real property, that often is valued in its own. So we're going to talk about whether the goodwill of the business has any value. There's the goodwill of the business is going to turn on a number of things that could be its own little segment, which also has no way of summarizing all the law on this. Then the last thing we're going to be looking at, and it's the last thing I'm going to talk to you about today, is going to be the capitalization rate. Whatever the number that the income that is determined to be for this business, the expert is going to apply a capitalization rate, which can either mean the business is going to be more valuable than the bottom line on a yearly basis, or it's going to be less valuable in terms of establishing a value for the purpose of distributing the business and determining the outspouse's buyout interest. So there are other moving parts here. I cannot possibly go through all of this. This is the broadest possible overview. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you are planning on having a good weekend, and I do hope that you are finding this helpful, and you will be tuning in next week as we discuss a little bit more of the income approach in slightly greater depth. Thank you, and have a good afternoon. Have a good weekend.